Hey folks, I think you're really going to love today's conversation. Today's podcast is with the team at Warrenton, which is Tom Speers and Tessa Friedman. And Tom graduated from Fort Zumwalt South High School, and he continued his musical education at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln. He served as director of bands at the Ellsbury R2 School District for 7 years until coming to Warren County R3. He currently performs locally in a variety of groups and is the baritone sax player for the St. Louis Wind Symphony. Tessa Friedman is the band director at Black Hawk Middle School and the assistant band director at the high school in Warrenton. And she team teaches the 6th and 7th grade bands, along with the Warrenton Marching Warriors and the Warrenton Symphonic Band. And she spearheads the Black Hawk Middle School 8th grade band and the Color Guard. Originally from Fulton, Missouri, she attended MSU from 2005 to 2012, where she earned her Bachelor of Music Education and a master's degree in wind band conducting. And while at MSU, she performed with the University Wind Ensemble, the Wind Symphony, the Symphonic Band, the Jazz Band, and various entertainment ensembles. She studied with Dr. Belva Prather, Mr. Jerry Hoover, and Dr. Grant Peters. Prior to moving to the Warren County R3 School District in 2018, Tessa taught for 6 years as the assistant band director in the Moberly Public Schools. This is her 10th year in public education in Missouri.
I'm really excited to talk about our conversation today. We just brainstormed off the top of our heads a couple of things we want to talk about, but I'm sure as we get going, we're going to find all kinds of other cool bits of wisdom to share. But one of the things that I think has impressed some of your peers and why they wanted to hear what you all had to say on the podcast was that you've had a lot of success building a traditional music program, but in a rural area and growing it. And it just seems like, especially once the two of you got together, and obviously, Tom, you had a really good assistant before, and Tom, oh shoot, what's Tom's last name?
Tom.
Say it again.
Tom.
Perry. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I was like, I remembered his first name, but dropped his last name. But it just seems like it's continued to grow. So tell me a little bit about how you have gone about trying to build a quality music program and a growing program in a rural area like Warren.
I think the big thing is just getting kids into the door that maybe weren't in the door in the first place. And that's a hard thing for band directors to swallow. We start them in 6th grade, and in our program, we get to carry them all the way up, which I think is a huge part of our success, is that we both see them day one and we both see them their last day of high school, which a lot of programs don't get that. So with that kind of power, it's awesome. But I learned early in my career, there's kids that skip through the cracks. Like I've had kids that were amazing band kids in high school, wanted to take home ec their 6th grade year and didn't sign up for band. And then they got lost in the program. And I know previously in this program, they had tried several variations of things to try and get those kids back in. We were lucky enough to find drumline and marching band as a good pathway back into band for kids. And we did I worked with a gentleman by the name of Greg Coots, who's a outstanding percussionist and was in the Zumwalt South world when I was there in high school. And his wife, Chris Coots, also worked there, and they became lifelong teacher, mentor, friends. And he came in and helped us really well to start to bring some of those kids back. So we do a chop shop program that kids come, and we do it on Saturdays, and they come for the day. And so basically it doesn't matter if you've ever touched music in your life, we're going to teach you everything to be a member of a drum line. And so that became a real good pathway for kids who didn't make it in the program before to come back. And when you have that kid that shows back up after a long period of time, it's like, I really miss band, but I don't remember how to play my instruments. We would say, come join us at Chop Shops. And I think that was a huge help, a way to get kids back in the programs. And Greg was really good about going out and even teaching me how to go find those, as he calls them, the lost kids, the kids that don't really have something that they're a part of and really could be super successful. And we were able to pull a lot of those kids in. The first few years, it was teaching a kid, here's a C on a marimba, and writing parts for those kids until they could learn how to play. And then it became to a point now where the kids are training the other kids. We have kids stay after all the time that are showing another kid how to play tenor who saw it, or showing another kid how to play snare. And we don't go easy. You don't make our snare tenor line without having chops and without doing the work. And we give them the tools. We give them a big handbook of here's how you do it. And if you do the work, there's a place for you. And we've been shocked at that. So I would say that was one huge avenue of pulling some of those kids in a non-traditional area that maybe your parents couldn't afford an instrument in sixth grade. We used to lose kids to that. And we've taken in that world, we've taken it. If you want to be in band and you're willing to put some work into it, we're going to find you an instrument to play. We've had success there. But the other avenue would be, I think, where Miss Friedman could really chime in here would be through our color guard program is another place where you have students that aren't traditional band kids, or maybe they were a band kid, but just didn't have that same passion for an instrument. And we've been able to turn that into a rather successful guard program that has helped really grow, once again, the numbers of the band and the size. Because this year we marched 130 in a rural area, which is up there in the numbers. When I started in Warrenton, we were in the 65 range.
Yep.
And we've been able to, as I said, and it's not just we start more kids in sixth, and we've created a really positive family atmosphere that I think plays heavily into it. But I think through the area of drumline and through color guard, which I think Miss Friedman could talk a little bit about, we were able to take a lot of those kids that had slipped through the cracks, who loved music in some way, shape, or form, and bring them back into a program and make them part of something, which is the overall goal, in my opinion. We're all just trying to have some sort of positive influence on kids.
Yeah. Before we get into guard, because I definitely want to get into that, because I think that's something that would be very helpful. I want to talk a little more about Chop Shop. So I think a lot of people do have the idea of recruiting former players to try to get them back in, which I think is a great idea. And I think you're obviously on the right path of thinking about reaching those who were in the activity at one point and then left. So if a kid played saxophone before, we could try to get them back in, and even back in on saxophone if possible. I think that's great. And I think a lot of directors are doing that. But the idea of getting them back into another role, or even getting someone who's never been in it into a role, I think that's something that I don't hear done often a lot. And I made a quick note of Crystal Boyd, but she started in, I believe she started in band in high school.
Yeah.
And I wanted to play the trumpet, and she was in the percussion section and also learned to play the trumpet. And now she's in the National Guard Reserves and does the Army Reserve Band, and a music educator, all from starting in high school, basically. And which is a tremendous success story. So tell me about how this Chop Shop thing, like in general, when you bring someone in, is there already a guideline of where you're starting them, or is it dependent on each kid? Kind of walk me through how that program works.
It's all based around what is dubbed the Book of Magic. And this would be a Greg Coots thing. And it's something I grew up with. And then he's given me the resources. And as I said, he's been a mentor to me every step of my career. And it was something that he was able to pass on. And he builds these lessons, these life lessons. And that's a theme that will probably come out throughout this podcast, is that our focus and my focus my entire career has been teaching life skills. And I think a lot of directors take that approach, but finding things, trying to make these kids good people as well as good musicians. Because if you have great people in a band, as we learned this year with our change in things, if you have great people in a band, you can run a band program without 25 staff. You can put a lot of trust in kids. So this Book of Magic is created, and it has these rules of drumline, and it has these laws, and most of them are based around Greg's life experience and my life experience, and meshed together into these kind of overall good things. He has the Dead Sea Scrolls, so dedication. You have to be dedicated, put in great effort, have a great attitude, and you have to have the desire to want to do good things. And then he has these kind of life lessons that most of your life is about the memories and making memories. And he helped to build a family atmosphere. And that was something I was already doing, and he helped do that. So what we did is when I got there, my drum line was tiny. I had a snare, a tenor, a couple basses, one person in our pit. And I knew what a competitive marching band was going to take, and that wasn't going to be it. So we invested a lot of money in equipment up front. I used the new teacher slogan, new teachers out there. Your first year, go ask your principal for everything. They don't say no a whole lot your first year. Your second year, they've learned to say no a little bit more, but go ask for everything. I asked for 3 marimbas. I told them, they said they wanted to build a program. I said, I need 3 marimbas and 2 vibes and a bass line and this. And they were like, how much is that going to cost? And I'm like, only about 80. Honestly, sell it that they're used to. We think as band directors, we forget that they spend $100,000 on an air conditioner unit for school. So if this is maintenance of the program and stuff. So I'd say go out and ask for stuff. And once we had the equipment, we had to put kids on it. Otherwise it was going to waste. So we literally took anybody who would walk in the door. So it's 12 weeks all on a Saturday. We start at 8 in the morning and we'd end at 5 o'clock at night when we were first starting. We've whittled that back. We've become more efficient and we need less. We don't need to pull 30 kids. We had 31 in drumline this year and we're graduating 3. So we'll
Wow.
probably pull in another 15 for chop shops. We're running out of places to put them, but I'm not turning kids away that are willing to do work. And you have to show up. You have to put in the time. They pay a small fee because there's a lot of wisdom in the kids have to have something invested in the program. Just
Yep.
even that $50 that they have to ask their parents for and come up. Now with that $50, they get a t-shirt. Everybody gets the same pair of drumsticks that are wrapped with tape ready to roll. So you got something to go home and practice. Everybody gets their book that has all their music and stuff in it. That's all part of that fee. And everybody gets snacks and stuff of the day. We'll have pizza or we just buy a whole bunch we go to Aldi's and raid Aldi's and just have snacks and sodas and waters because they're going to be hanging out all day. We've learned over the years, and Greg really showed me the light on the fact that once you get them in the door, the kids don't really want to leave. They would hang out and play drums all day, every day, if you let them.
Right.
And a lot of the times it's our time that's the thing that's valuable as far as we have families and lives outside of school too. But we've learned that if you can get them in the door, they love to come for a Saturday and hang out all day and play drums.
Yeah.
And it was truly at the beginning teaching, here's a kid, here's where a C is. Up, you only got one note that bar, we'll get one note in the next bar, get one note here. And I had this epiphany at the beginning of my career in Ellsbury that I was able to take musicians or people who had basic knowledge of stuff and put them on a percussion instrument. And not that percussion is easy, because we all know to play percussion takes a little bit more than just hitting a drum. We all know that. But if you understand rhythms and you can follow and you have a whole lot of people around you that can, it's amazing with watching the music and having basic concepts that they start to learn to read music without me going, here's a quarter note, here's an eight. So we had success there, and it was a struggle at first. And we brought in the beginning, it was a lot more staff. And as I said, as time goes on, we'll talk about another theme here. We always talk about building traditions at our school, and that every previous generation has an impact on the next. And when you walk out my band room doors, above the door, it says building a tradition of excellence. And that's been our mantra, our theme, our thing. And so what we found is year 1, we maybe needed 8 or 9 people to teach all these kids. Year 2, we needed 5 because now we had kids that could lead a cymbal section, who could start to teach kids melodies. Now, me and Friedman walk in, we have amazing students who we had some boys this year that I would have thought could have never played a mallet, who were doing dances and spins and flipping, just because we had leadership that was like, no, this is what we do. This is how it's done. And it's amazing. We would stand back and go, could you have gotten them to do that? And she'd no, I could. In a million years, I would have never thought that kid would be doing that right there. That's what came of it. You build these bonds, you build the relationships, you sell the family. Some of these kids don't have a family to go home to that's a normal family, and they can come to school, and some days they hate each other, some days they love each other, but in the end, we still end every day with that thing. So Chop Shop became that path in. And then once it was known, the kids sell it now. It's somebody says, oh, I miss band. They're like, you should come join Chop Shops. Come step into Chop Shops. Come see that. Personally, I haven't had a lot of luck with kids coming back to their instrument in high school. I wish I had. I wish that was a pathway that I saw, an easy way to make happen.
Yeah.
But in our environment, where we're teaching the lessons after school, we're doing the solo and ensemble, we're the private instructor. We don't have kids taking private lessons very often, or maybe very top elite that just need more than we can give them. So when you're the lessons and everything, we didn't have the time. We don't have time, unfortunately, to go back. Drumline was a thing. Hey, we're going to block off this time. We're going to be there all day. If you show up and you do work, we'll find a place.
I think the only reason I mentioned about reaching those who had quit to come back, I think that's a tactic that many directors use, but it has very small, like limited results. Like maybe
100%.
you get a kid a year or so, a couple tops from that, and kids is not going to help you grow to where we're talking about. Whereas when you open it, when to think more broadly about percussion and guard, man, you can now start getting into double digits in terms of the numbers you can add to your program. And I know, not being a percussionist myself, and I had one semester of percussion
Yeah.
methods
A lot
in
of people learn that thing.
a lifetime ago, but it does seem like the kind of instrument that if you'll just put the time in it, like, you can get competent pretty quickly. Whereas on a lot of the wind instruments, certainly on brass players, man, I don't know. I know a lot of people that put a fair amount of time in their instruments that
Yeah.
still sound terrible. So, because
Most
you've got
people
like
don't like it.
embouchure and everything that's important is invisible. Like with the wind instrument, you can't, everything that is relevant to how they sound and play, you can't actually see it. It's all happening behind the mouthpiece and in their mouth and in their body. But with
Yeah.
percussion, you can see the sticks or mallets in their hands. You can see the thing they're supposed to hit's right in front of you. You can see the actual note. The note is right in front of you. You just hit it. Like,
Yeah.
it's so much easier than it's just out there in the ether and you have to find it. There's
You
no
think that-
break. So there's no like clarinet break or anything. Anyway, it
Yeah,
just
you
seems like it's
that
an
kid
easier.
though on like a bass line because that's a thing where you have to know how to read music. But the reality is when you see do and you feel out where you go, it's amazing those kids who have never read music. And a lot of, as I said, Greg was a big inspiration for this. I was lucky enough, and one of something that's helped this obviously is that I was in drumline in high school. I took that path along with playing saxophone and stuff. So I had that stuff. And Greg was my percussion instructor in high school. So I had this, but we had one of the best bass lines in the state of Missouri. And consistently, we would go out and we played really well together. And the fifth bass guy was a pole vaulter. He had never played music in his life. He was a junior. Greg, we call him Buddha, found him out in the school one day and says, "You should be in drumline." And he came in and he couldn't read music. Greg was able to write the music for the kids. And that's a huge advantage too. That is something that not everybody has that thing, but I would recommend for directors, even if you have basic knowledge. When I was in Ellsbury, I rewrote every percussion part for every percussion. And I think if you do that, you open yourself up because I can have a marimba player who knows 12 notes and I can write a part that they can play. And it's amazing. They'll learn to play that in the first month and I can hand them another part that's a little bit harder and a little bit harder. And then at the end of the year, they know how to read. They can play all the warm ups. And that's the other thing. We do a lot of warm ups with them that they may not get all the notes and you have to learn, hey, you're going to be in a drum line. There's a lot of people around you that are going to get, doesn't mean you have to be perfect today.
Right.
It means you need to take one step towards getting better. If you got one note on that exercise, get two. If you got two, get three. And eventually you're going to hit them all.
Yeah.
But you have to be willing to fail. You have to be willing to take a risk. And those are all huge skills for going to the workforce. As in business and stuff, you have to be willing to fail. You're going to fail a ton in your life, a ton. And if we're not teaching that as band directors or allowing kids to fail, we're failing because I'm a perfectionist. I want everything to be perfect. Friedman's the same way on a lot of things and especially as wind players, we know if you don't hold the trumpet, if you don't hold the trombone, if you don't hold the saxophone, you're not going to be as successful as if you do. But
Right.
percussion is one of those places where I can hand you a stick and you can hit it wrong and I can show you how to hit it and you can show you again how to hit it. And it doesn't take maybe those same things. And as I said, there's those fundamentals, but drumline seemed to be an avenue where we went to match grip for everybody very specifically. So we taught one way. And in middle school, we hand every kid in sixth grade a pair of drumsticks when we do rhythms and we start teaching them there how to so even if they don't make it, it's like there. And I would say that's another, we could maybe side topic on this thing is that we've eliminated percussion in the sixth grade level, which is a little controversial.
Okay. I've
Yeah.
had this idea for years, and every time I bring it up, people look at me like I just grew a third eye.
You're not.
So tell me about it. Tell me.
I'm sorry I'm talking so much.
No, we're gonna come back to color guard, I promise, because that's an
Yeah.
important part of it. But I
So-
definitely want to hear about this idea.
This was something I started in Ellsbury and it was a small enough program. By the time I was starting this program, we were starting 60 kids a year. I had worked out, go make friends with your counselor, go talk to him. And I had asked, what can I do? Like I was going to sixth grade and I introduced it and then kids would sign up. I was like, can I bring every kid to my room for 2 days? And they were like, yeah, why not? I was like, so every kid, I'm just going to have them come down to the band room. I'm going to talk to them. Yeah, that's fine. And then it was, can I have them for a week? Yeah, sure. The teachers would love an hour off at the end of the day. So every kid came to the band room. So it was no longer, did you sign up for band or not? It was, I'm going to spend a week with these kids and convince them to be in music. And we'd put up our instrumentation on the board and do all that. So anyway, so it started in that where I was trying to get as many kids involved in the program and we were starting a lot of kids. But I wasn't having as much success with trombone players, trumpet players, all these instruments that I knew without, I could have 10 percussionists. Everybody wanted to play percussion. I can't build a band with just percussion.
Mhm.
Even though Greg would love, my percussion instructor would love
Right.
a band of all percussionists. But so I made the choice at some point. Once again, I had learned through these chop shops and through doing these things, which I had begun doing in Ellsbury, of these training sessions, that I could take a kid who hadn't played an instrument and teach them percussion. And I was learning that when I was starting percussionist, they would get to a certain point, but they hated the bell kit. I sold it as well as I could. I'm a decent salesman. I could not sell the bell kit as something great. And I knew without reading music, they weren't going to be successful down the road, because I was going to
Mhm.
need them to play mounts. I was going to need them to understand what a G on a staff was or an F. So I started seeing all these gaps in the things, and I made a controversial decision at the time, which was, I'm going to teach you percussion in seventh grade, but you need to start on an instrument. And that, it eliminated a whole bunch of classes that I had to teach. It eliminated a whole area that I had to teach. And it became an avenue for me to, maybe 6 kids that wanted to play percussion, maybe 2 of them fall in love with the trumpet before they ever make it to percussion. And that doesn't mean they can't play percussion, but it means they play trumpet on 3 tunes and percussion on. And I was able to take those kids, and if you can read a rhythm and play the articulation with your tongue, and I teach you how to hold drumsticks, you can play a snare rhythm on a snare drum, and you
Yeah.
could play a timpani on a thing. So I just found the success there, and it paid out for 2 or 3 years. There were my drumline program at the high school grew because I had more percussionists. My program grew because I had more kids that stuck with it. I wasn't losing 6 of my 7 percussionists every year because they were bored, because I'm teaching trombone and clarinet and flute and everything in the same class. Of course,
Yeah.
your percussionist is bored. Like, I didn't
Yep.
blame them.
Yep.
I understood, and they told me they were bored. I asked kids, I said, no offense whatsoever. Tell me why you're like, why don't you want to be here? I fully support you leaving, but just give me something. I'm bored. You're right. I should have done better for you. And it was one of those things where I was like, I can engage kids higher. How many administrators tell us that every day? I can
Yep.
up my engagement. I can do this, and I can still have a successful percussion program. So this year in Warrenton is our first year of making that full switch. So it's our first year where we started no percussionists last year and we switched them this year. And we've learned some things on a program this scale because it's different than it was in Ellsbury. But we have learned our percussionists read rhythms way better than before, but they're weaker at mallets right now. So that's something we can continue to improve. We are lucky that we team teach, which is a thing. So I pull percussion and go teach a totally separate class with seventh grade, where I'm teaching them basic rhythm stuff, and I'm teaching them, here's the notes on the mallets. And as I said, they're not loving it and they're not successful right out of the gates, but it's getting there. And then as we start concert music, there's days we're here and we're days we're in our room. So 2 days a week, maybe I'm in the classroom down there teaching, and 2 days they're with us. And we had a really successful concert with percussionists who had never played percussion prior to this year. Now, we do start at the very end of 6. We take those kids interested in it. We show them their first thing. Here's a pair of cymbals. Here's how you hold them. Crash when it gets to your beat. And they already know how to count rests. They already know how to read music. So finding that crash is way easier than it was for a kid who had only learned mallets prior. And so all these things. Now, 5 years from now, maybe I'll look back and say it doesn't work at a larger program. I'm pretty positive that's not going to be the result. Like, we're going to do it again next year. We're going to continue. We didn't start any this year. And I think it'll be a pathway for a while, and we'll see where it pays out. But we
I
were
think
finding that success at the high school. We were finding that success in the middle school. So it's only logical at that point. But go ahead. Yeah.
I think it's important to remember also, when you're looking at a sixth grader, they're small people. Like,
Yeah.
and oddly, every year they seem to get smaller, but they're also like very young. And so when you set them up on we were using the wood mallets because I do think it's a better transition into playing on an actual marimba than the little metal ones. Like, by the time a sixth grade kid, a little tiny sixth grade kid, drags their stuff down the hallway and they set up and they have a stand and they put their book up and their book falls down and they lose their mallets and something falls out of their bag and they get everything set up so it's not wobbly. We were getting not a lot of quality instruction with those kids. 90% of the class period was just getting these tiny people to set up something that was really far too big for them to be dealing with. And then the whole disconnect of, I'm seeing it on the paper, but now my hands have to do this thing and I have to look down here and there's all these notes going on. And then I'm having to look up and look down. And what we were finding is that they were all just memorizing their music. And so they weren't actually reading music. They were just learning a pattern and doing the pattern. And so then when you gave that, we were like, oh, our kids can play mallets. Well, then you give them a piece of sheet music and they turns out they can't actually play mallets. They can play Good King Wenceslas and Mary Had a Little Lamb because that's what got stuck in their brain when they were playing. I think like when you put a kid on trumpet and you're like, okay, the bottom line is E, it's 1, 2, and you blow the air. All of that is very compact. There's not a lot of stuff going on outside of them. And I do think that makes a difference. They're reading music better. They know what it sounds like. They know all of that stuff. And we tell band kids all the time, band kids can sing. And even a percussionist, if you know what that pitch sounds like, you're going to know when you hit a wrong note. You're going to know when it feels wrong, when it sounds wrong. And so I think just starting that in a little bit more compact of a world, even on trombone, where it's a bigger instrument and there's a lot going on, everything is very contained into their body. And so before you're like, all right, you've got to carry this mallet and this stand and this book and this bell kit and this rolls, and then you have a snare sticks and mallets and a practice pad. It's like a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And it's very overwhelming. And I think we have found a lot that it's just easier for us, for the kids, for the parents. It's less to keep track of, and they're learning the same thing.
Yeah.
They're learning the same things. And so it's just like, why give them that headache to deal with when we could teach it somewhere else and then just transfer it when they're a little bit more, those like developmental traits have happened.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big part of it that so many people look over is, would you be able to carry around all that stuff every day? No, I wouldn't want to. I would forget something. I would not have it. I would not be prepared. And it's less exciting to take it home and practice with it because I got to take that big thing and then get all that done.
Just the logistics.
Driveway. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Just the
It's
logistics
not
of hauling
enticing.
this crap around is
Yeah,
challenging.
it's not enticing to us as adults, so it's not going to be enticing to a person that's half of our size trying to manage the same equipment. So
Yeah.
And you're still teaching them in 7th grade how to play a timpani and a bass because you're not doing that. We teach specialized classes. We were going to another room to teach percussion. It didn't work to stay in a room. And even if it did, you don't have time in 6th grade we used to do a tour of percussion instruments and show them the timpanis, but you're still teaching that in 7th grade, whether you like it or not. You're teaching that with literature. We all do. It's why we have literature. So you said it very well there, Ms. Friedman, of that it opened up these things. And we even reflected this year after our first concerts, man, we had less time issues. We had less issues with engagement. And here's the thing. If you got 14 percussionists and they all know how to play instruments, guess what the 7th that aren't playing are going to go play an instrument. Like how many band directors complain that they have kids that have nothing to do. Or if it's a scale day, everybody sits down with an instrument and they play their scales and then they go learn it on mallets because they've already remembered the notes. And there's some different, they have 2 sets of scale sheets, and one I work on them with in the classroom and one they have when they're sitting with the whole class. But scales are our foundation for us because it's what music is. Like music is a whole bunch of scales in different orders. And so we teach that way. And I think that's the right. I do think it's the right answer. I don't know if it's for every school. I don't know if it's for every program, but I think it's something that educators should look at as a definite option. You have to sell it though. That's the other thing. There can be great confusion with this. There can be kids who think I can't be in band if I don't want to be percussion. We are very clear to say, no, if we want awesome. You want to play percussion? Great. Can you just pick a trumpet or a clarinet or a flute? And you're going to start there. And then we're going to put you on percussion as soon as possible. And kids are okay with that. They want to learn 2 instruments. Every kid does. They're like, oh, I'm going to know 2 instruments. Yeah, you are. And like, they're pumped about it. It's hard for some kids. And we probably lose a few kids who don't want to learn another. I just want to play drums. But the reality in my brain is those are kids that probably weren't going to make it past 6th grade. Maybe I'll learn down the line. Maybe I'll find a couple kids that have come back and said, I didn't do band because I didn't do percussion. But I think if you sell it right at the beginning and you explain it to the parents and you make sure that everybody understands, we want percussionists. Look at my drum.
And with your
5 in our drum line, like with your
Chop Shops program, you're getting those kids later anyway, if they didn't come in. And I just feel like with percussion, because I had this conversation with a couple of guys that they're actually percussion specialists. And of course, the percussion specialists don't like the idea, but I felt like they were just a little myopic in their view based on their experience, because when I go into middle school band rooms all across Missouri, I see percussionists sitting back there with nothing to do. They're almost always the number one
they're
discipline
doing
problem.
stuff. They put holes in the wall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, you're 100%. And that's the same. We all see the same thing. And it was just, that was a reaction to that. And I was one man doing everything. So as much of that distraction I could get rid of, it made me want to teach more. Cause when kids aren't engaged and they're not having, it's deflating as an instructor. It even gets that way in high school because we wanted to build this huge drum line, but now we have the beast of concert season comes and I have 35 percussionists who all want to play parts. And that has become an issue. And it's still one of those things I'd solve. When I first got here, most of the percussionists left after marching season. So we had 8 or 9, and then 4 would stay for concert season because they just didn't want to be there. And I've found a way to sell it that they want to be there now, but now I have to deal with 30 percussionists. There's a thing, but to me, I'm still offering those kids a good experience. We're still doing pep band and other things. So there's days that those kids are 100% engaged and you have to sprinkle those throughout. There's going to be pep band days where Tuesday and Thursday of this week, you're going to play the whole hour. And maybe Wednesday and Friday, you're a little bit bored, but you have to play on a tune. So you will get to your tune. You'll play something every day. It just may not be as much as the clarinet player. And if
And I
you want to
think
go play your instrument, we have a ton of them that are in drumline who then in concert season go and sit and play an instrument
That's awesome.
all the time, like trumpet players, clarinets. We have consistent, same thing with color guard. We have color guard members who love music and love band, and they go color guard and then they come back and they're right in our concert band, and it works beautifully in our program for sure.
Tom and I run a concert band with 110 kids in it.
Yeah.
And you have to make programmatic choices about things like that. And yep, a lot of our concerts are pretty punch them in the face with sound and music and things like that. But our parents love it. They love that about them. And we do pick a lot of stuff, I think, that keeps those kids engaged a lot. So
Yeah. I think
it's a give and take for sure.
there's another benefit too when you have normally our percussionist, when we started them in 6th grade, they have their parts down before anybody else does, which is why they're bored. And if you put the shoe on the other foot and they're in 7th grade and they're actually maybe a little behind where everybody else is at, there's a little bit of that pressure of I gotta like kind of pay attention to what's going on here because everyone else is getting through this okay, and I'm having to learn it. And now they're actually really engaged the whole time.
You just hit the nail on the head 100%. I actually hadn't even thought about it that way, but you're 100% right that they are a little behind everybody. And there is this frantic, oh my gosh. And there's the kids in the clarinet are looking back at the snare player like you're dragging. And those snare players go home and they work their butts off. So they're not the reason that the band is. And it's not that they can't do it, it's that they haven't developed this yet. But a lot of that's what I'm doing in the classroom too. The first couple months, they're really weak with they don't have chops. They don't, all those things that I'm sure those core percussion people you're talking to are like, why don't they have those? But the reality is they have other skills. These are the things we're developing now. Flipping the script. It's the same thing. It's just you're flipping the script on when. Instead of teaching mallets in 6th grade, we're teaching the rhythm and stuff that they'd probably learn as they got more advanced stuff. And we leave out some of the rudiments and stuff until they get to 8th grade because we're teaching them the thing. So we take a lot of rolls out of our marches. You see that roll there, we're doing quarter note. Now that doesn't mean that's not something I'm teaching in the classroom to them. They are. We're talking about flams. We're talking about rolls. But we're approaching them from a double stroke roll sometimes instead of a buzz roll because 6th grade band, they teach buzz rolls, page 7. Those kids buzzing, and then they have horrible technique because they never learned the right. We leave all that stuff out when we're teaching them in 7th. They already know how to read the rhythms. But now I can say, see that slash, we're going to play that as a double. And then we're going to play the triple slash rolls as 16th notes. And so now we're changing their percussion parts. And then it's a matter of, okay, now that you know all that, oh, by the way, if you just buzz those 16th notes, it's going to make this awesome roll. And boom, then they have that skill. So it's flipping the script on how it is. And I think if people just take time, that's the big thing.
I love that. And this whole chop shop idea, which obviously I need to do a future episode with Greg Coots and talk through that. But
Yeah.
I think as we think about our ensemble, certainly one way that we can not only just bring numbers, but also fill it out sonically is to have more percussion, especially front ensemble. And for concert band and especially in marching band, we just see the importance of having a quality and strong front ensemble. Gosh, it's just been such a major part of marching band today. And so a program like this does a great job for that. Another, though, a very important part of filling out the look of our marching band and getting more kids around musicians and music makers and fans of that is building the color guard. And I think that's an area that a lot of folks struggle in that you all have had some success with. So Tessa, why don't you talk to us about how you've gone about that and recruiting students for color guard and how you teach them and Tell us your secrets.
I came to have this kind of role in Warrenton because my first year, Tom came to me and was like, "Can you just go do something with them?" And I was like, "Okay." I have zero color guard experience. I did not do it in high school. I did not do it in college. I had recently picked up enough skill to be able to teach some very basic things, which turns out is all you need, everybody. You don't have to be like some like WGI alumnus to be able to teach these kids. But what we're doing, I think we're slowly trying to work the color guard angle into that kind of chop shop angle. And so the first thing we do, I teach most of my day at the middle school, and I know that the majority of our recruits are going to come from those incoming freshmen that are coming in. I send a full staff email to the entire middle school staff around the beginning of April, and I say, "Hey, let me know some kids that you think enjoy music, they're creative, they hang out around a lot of band kids, they maybe look like they need a place that they need to be, an activity that they would be into, and things like that." And I amass a list because the teachers deliver. I probably have a list of 30 to 40 names that come to me every year from just the middle school teachers. And I email each one of those kids. We do a series of clinics before we do auditions. That's like the chop shop aspect. We teach them basic skill. We teach very simple choreography. We have all of the returners that can come show up so that they are spinning, and I mix them in so that everybody is in together. And I reach out to each one of those kids and I tell them the dates and the times and the locations of those things. I tell them that we want them to be there. I share that list of prospective students that are interested with the current color guard members. So if they know anyone of them personally from their days in middle school, or if they know their older siblings or something, they can reach out to those students. And we have had anywhere from 30, 35 people between beginners and returners show up to one of these clinics. And it's not for all of them, but we give them an opportunity to find out if it's for them.
Right, and you find out you can.
And I watch and I tell them all the time, like, you can learn the choreography, that's great. But if you have a bad attitude, that's not what we're looking for here. If you can't get any of the choreography, but you're laughing and you're having fun and you're trying and you're taking your stuff home every day and you're practicing, yeah, that's what we want. That's what we're looking for. And in fact, this year, we started what we call the apprenticeship program. We marched 20 on the field and we had 3 in what we call an apprenticeship program. So they shadowed a returning member as they set drill. They learned all of the same routine. They were held to all of the same standards. And then they were ready to jump in. So for example, we had one that I knew was going to be absent for a football game in October. She had told me way back, like in July, I'm going to be out of town this weekend. I was able to put one of those apprentice kids with her who maybe struggled a little during camp to learn that quickly, but she was able to practice for that spot all year and then jumped in at the football game. And then we were able to march without a hole, which was great for us. And she was able to have kind of that home crowd experience and understand what it takes to be able to do that. We had another apprentice. She wasn't quite ready to take on the full responsibility of learning the work and stuff like that, but she plays flute. So she marched, but learned all the guard work as well and came to all of the rehearsals and she was there ready to roll and to learn. And so we are growing the next generation of the competitive guard in that apprenticeship program, which I think Spears and I have talked about. We would like to expand that out a little bit past the guard, and we were prototyping it a little bit. And again, we learned some things about what worked and what didn't and the expectations that we have for them. But I do think it was successful. It definitely gave some kids a place to feel like they were successful and that they belonged, which is a big thing for our program, but it didn't necessarily hold back the quality of the group, which is always a thing I think directors struggle with. We want these kids to have a place to be, sometimes to our own detriment. And so we just created a place for them to grow. They'll all be on our non-competitive winter guard. We have an open winter guard. If you show up to rehearsal, I'll put you in a show. And that does a lot. We gain a lot of people that way that are like, oh, I'm actually good at this. I'd like to learn this. And then we have a lot of kids who join that winter guard program because they want to go to school to be a band director. We have several that come out and they're instrumentalists, and a couple of them going to school for music. And they're like, oh, I don't want to compete in the fall, but I want to know, like, when somebody says this, what does it mean? And that's something that is invaluable. It's something that we don't learn and they don't teach enough in college, people that are going into music ed.
You still want to hold the quality of these groups high. And that's why we audition our drum line. So just because you come to chop shops and just because you show up, we do, I will say, we push to keep every kid we possibly can, but it's not for everybody. And same thing with color guard. Like those kids in that apprentice program, you have two choices. You can cut everybody that doesn't make the group, that is not going to be competitive, or you can say, okay, you two people, you didn't do any work, so you didn't make the group, but you three showed us that you want to be here. So let's give you a role. And they still come to rehearsals, and those kids show up the same as every other kid there. They're still part of the family. They feel a part of the group every way, shape, or form. And then even some of them, when we went indoor, we compete. We try and do an indoor garden and indoor drumline during marching season, just as a way for those kids to have another chance to express themselves. But those kids participated in our indoor guard just as they were part of the group, because they had already learned the routine. Now, some of them didn't do all three tunes because they only knew maybe one or two, and that was their skill level now.
Right.
But they still got to stand there and be in the uniform and perform. And judges didn't care that a kid was on the field for two and then off for, like, nobody cared. Sometimes we get caught up in that. We get caught up in wanting to win. It's awesome to want to win. I think you should have that as a goal. I think being successful is never a negative thing, but it can't only be about the winning. It has to be about educating kids in music and in life. And that's what we're able to do with these programs. And as I said, I threw Ms. Friedman very much into the thing, because in a program like this, and I'm sure there's a lot of directors in small schools that can relate, I drove myself nearly insane writing color guard work and rewriting the drum parts and all that when I started in Ellsbury. I was in a small school, and I knew when I came to Warrenton, I couldn't do it. Like, I was like, I'm not going to be a band director in a few years if I keep doing this. So I found really strong kids at first to keep going, but then I needed an educator there. You need a teacher, somebody that's there. And Zach Barber, who we referenced earlier, came out and he would do a clinic, but he was still doing things. And I had people all along the way that helped to support it. We didn't do it single-handedly. We needed support at the beginning. And then, as Ms. Friedman was talking about a little bit here at the beginning, is that this was our year where we flipped the switch and, can this program run with just the two of us and student leaders? And the answer is yes. Like, you can bring in staff for these training sessions, for these chop shops, for these clinics. And we have color guard people that help us write the work, or there's tons of work being written out there. It's glorious right now as the marching band director. You can buy a show with work that's really good quality, that addresses the drill in the way we'd want to. That doesn't mean I don't write my own shows. Yes, I've wrote plenty of marching shows, and I change things, but a director in a small town can go buy a show and make it their own. We don't need every spin of everything. You teach the kids there. Yeah.
And I think it's important we've been talking about leaning on those students and things like that. When there's two of us running 130-piece marching band, there were times when I had to look at my guard captains and say, you have to split off and you have to teach this. That is something that they need to be held to that standard before they get the job. They need to know, I'm going to put you down there and I need you to know the work. I need you to know the counts. I need you to teach it. They taught themselves the whole third tune. I met with the captains over the summer. The work they had already, like the teaching DVD they had, but I split it up. We collectively split it into 3 sections, and they taught it. I did not know the work. I did not know it. I did not know if it was being taught correctly. I taught them, sometimes you have to make an executive decision and say, I can't really see what he's doing here, but I know enough about guard and I trust my skill in doing what I'm doing. Because in surprise, tearing back the curtain a little bit, that guard had 20 competing members and 3 non-competing members, and 2 of them had done a competitive show before. And so it's a lot to look at those kids who have done this one time and say, you need to trust your skill and to be able to do this. But I mean, it also takes us as the adults saying, I trust you and I trust your skill.
Right.
And that's something our kids hear constantly. We tell them, and Spears, this is your thing, but it's true. It's, if you make a decision, if you make an executive decision because you can't find us or it needs to be made in the moment, we are never going to be mad at you for making a decision. And communicating the decision and moving forward with the decision, even if it wasn't something he and I would have chosen. Is it safe? Was it responsible? Was it respectful to the people around you? Did it get the job done? Yes. Then that is a decision that you made as a leader.
I will be mad if you don't make a decision. I said,
yes.
That's the worst thing that happened. Like, our biggest frustration, especially as the program grew, because it grew large enough that it's not a 2-person program anymore, but it became make the best decision you can at the time. And you have to teach them to do this. It didn't happen in a year. This is
Right.
not, as we talk about tradition.
Culture. It's
It
a
is.
culture. Yeah.
Tradition is the culture. And I was consistently shocked at when I gave kids responsibility, how much more they did than I expected. Like consistent. I think every director can relate to that. Like we'd give drum majors power and they would do 10 times what I would have expected them to do. Like we had drum majors like putting up whiteboards and putting calendars up in the band room. And if you give them a chance now, every once in a while you have to say, that's a decision for me. I
Right.
appreciate you doing that, but I really need you to come to me first. And that, as long as you support them, don't ever shoot it down. You can kill this just as quickly as you can build it. You can stomp on one foot and make it not work. But I was super nervous with the decision of let's let the guard members learn, and they all had their parts. But the care at which they took to learn those parts was far greater than we could have ever expected. We expected them to wing it a little bit, as they do with all their school.
Yeah.
But those
The
kids
hard
knew
part
it.
to that is when you ask a kid to do something, you need to make sure, and this is something, this the what we skip 99% of the time as the professional adults is you have to model it. They're not going to do it unless you model the way that you want it done. And so I came in, I taught them the first 2 color guard tunes in camp. I came in with written down count sheets. I came in with video. I came in with the process for the day and the schedule. And I told them what we were doing from what time to what time. And they then started doing that. And you just have to show them what you want and they will respond to it.
Yeah.
Like, but if I went in with no plan and I was like, I guess we'll do this today, that's how they're going to teach as well, because that's what they're viewing the teacher is.
There's a mantra in training and teaching where I do it, you watch, you do it, I watch, and then you just do it.
Yeah.
And I think having that process is really important. And you all haven't gotten to hear this yet because of the time that we're recording this, but the interview I did with Rob Babel, that was something he discussed, was using student leadership. And he had mentioned in the last couple of years, they no longer call them section leaders, they call them peer mentors. And there's a few reasons behind that. And the main thing was trying to create a culture shift and a paradigm shift in how these section leaders viewed their role, that they weren't there to be the boss, they were there to mentor their peers. And he really wanted to change their mindset because he was seeing times where people were being too bossy, too authoritarian or whatever. But one of the comments he made was that he wanted to recognize, and it was important for him as a teacher to recognize and the students to recognize, that he's the paid professional. They're not. And so he didn't want to put them in a position that they weren't ready to do, but yet there's a lot of things they could do that would help their band program and help themselves. And that's exactly what you guys are advocating here about building that culture for that, which is critical as we start to build a growing program that can expand beyond just our own energies.
And I would say this looks different at every program. I would say what he's doing is very similar to what we're doing, but probably in a completely different way, which is the thing that I would encourage those people at smaller schools, because as I said, I was there. You can run yourself into the ground trying to be the greatest band director, and having that a passion is wonderful. But at a certain point, something has to give. And that's where Warrenton was, is I knew I wanted a giant program. Okay, now you have a giant program. Now, how do you not make it do the same thing that happened to you previously? I had immense support in Ellsbury from the community and from the staff and from the administration. All that stuff was there, but that doesn't teach lessons till 9:00 at night. Like those, and you can still drive yourself nuts with. And I started getting to the point when we've done this in Warrenton too, where the high schoolers come down and teach the middle schoolers, and you have high schoolers that you have a great horn player. You say, hey, you should go see Johnny. He just started horn. And those kids love to. They're like, let me show Johnny everything I know. And they're willing to make those things. And we have kids still today that go down to the middle school. They leave the high school. They drive across town to the middle school, and they come sit down with the 2, 3, 4 kids that show up and just play music out of their books with them. And as I said, those traditions, that community and all, that's what I grew up with. I think we're trying to, as you said, we're recreating. I still say things that my band director said to me. I hear them come out of my mouth and I just go, oh my God, that was so what they said every time this situation arose. But guess what? That's how we all live. We all imitate what we know.
Yeah.
And if we don't know it, we try and learn it and we imitate it. And then eventually it becomes our own. I would not have a chalk shop if it wasn't for Greg Coots. I had something similar, but he took it up a notch with the books and the skills. And he's a fabulous writer. And it was like he allowed so much more to happen because of his skills. And so I don't think you don't need anybody, because I've had great mentors every step of the way. I'd say Bob Hansen was somebody that I learned to teach middle school band from Bob Hansen stopping by once a week and me going, how do you teach a trumpet player to do this again? Could you show me? Because once you have that thing to imitate, like Miss Friedman was just talking about, you have to have some sort of model to go off of, and then it can become your own. And that's what we learn with these kids is, if you model it, then sometimes they take it way further than you would have. Like, we may come in with a count sheet. They may come in with a count sheet that's better. And like, they have their own way to do it. And it's amazing sometimes what they're able to do. Sometimes it doesn't work that way. And we've had failures just as well as success there. We may have 4 drum majors and 2 go above and beyond and 2 don't. But you're learning something about those kids, or maybe it's where they're at. So that's, to me, the overall goal here is just to try and create a positive atmosphere and give kids, no matter whether you're in a giant school, no matter whether you have $200,000 for a marching program, or a lot of times we get by on $2,000 or $3,000, but still giving them the same experience and allowing them to go out and be as successful as they possibly can. I think that's important.
I want to shift gears here real quick and talk about just the relationship you two have together and teaching together. And it's so great for anyone who's had the experience of, being the only band director, to have someone that you teach with. It just really helps to share the burden, divide the workload, and plus just gives you misery loves company. So just having someone else there. But it can be very difficult, though, to work together effectively on a team of 2 or more. And you two do seem to work really well together. Can you share some of the insights of what you've learned of like how to make this partnership effective?
I think there has to be some sort of mutual respect, obviously. But I also think you have to put ego aside. I think that's a big thing that I struggle with too, is I would control every aspect of everything if I could. But I also have the life experience of teaching in Ellsbury where I know that doesn't make me happy. So is it worth me controlling everything to not be happy, or is it better to give up just a little bit of that? And I say, it's not like everything's perfect every day. There's days she gets frustrated with me and vice versa. And I don't even think it's something that has to be said every time. I know when she's upset with me, and she knows pretty much when I'm not happy, and we discuss, or sometimes it is something we sit down and I go, I really would like to see this for 6th grade, or I'd really like to see 7th grade function this way. And a lot of times we agree. It's like, a lot of times it's just that reality check where if she's like, I really wish, Spears, that you would just do this way in the mornings. It'd make my life easier. Of like, you're 100%, I probably should. So it's being able to take some of that. And then every once in a while, you do have to have somebody that has to be the end all be all. I think that's, in the end, there has to be. I think we all have great ideas, but at some point, somebody has to make the thing. And as I said, I try and be that person at the high school, and I try and allow her to be that at the middle school. I've been at the district a little longer, so sometimes there's some high up things that it's easy. And sometimes, not to be sexist in any way, but sometimes there's something that a woman can do better than a guy can. There's a situation to approach, and sometimes there's things that I can handle that she might not be comfortable with, whether it's with a female student or a male student, or whether it's just something I might relate to the superintendent different than she does, or she might relate to this principal better than I do. And you have to play to your strengths, because we all have battles, and sometimes it's my battle to pick, sometimes it's hers. And sometimes at the high school, I know that if I go talk to this person, it's not going to get done, but I go, would you go ask if this can get done? And just the way that she approaches it is from a fresh perspective, it gets done. And you just have to play. There's a little bit of a game to all this. Like, you have to know who you're talking to and what you're talking about, and what's possible. And we try and play on each other's strengths. There's a lot of times where I walk in the office and I go, can you go do this for me? Because I just can't today. It's not my day to do this. Like, I know this is my responsibility, but if you could. And a lot of times that's not even a big deal, where to me, it would have taken every bit of energy I had that day to do something like that. Whether it's making a flyer, sometimes if there's that thing hanging over your head as a director, we go, I got to make that flyer later. And sometimes if I can just look at her and go, will you do this because it will make my whole day better? Absolutely. And vice versa. When she starts teaching 7th grade, is there anything I can do for you? Oh yeah, if you could copy that tune for 8th grade tomorrow, so I don't have to worry about it after school. Sure, I was going to sit here and read emails. I'd rather not do that anyway. Let me go and make these copies, because I'd rather her go home at the end of the day, so she's happy the next day, and she'd rather that I go home. And there's been a lot of times in our career where I have a young kid at home where she's, oh, I got this. You need to go home and be with your family right now, or don't come up here tomorrow. Like color guard, she took a lot of that off my plate this year. I don't want to see you up here on Sunday. And I'll go, I'm still going to stop by. And I might stop by for 5 minutes and she's, we're good, go. Like,
Right.
but you can drive yourself nuts trying to control all that, but you have to have somebody that's willing to do that, that you want to work with in some way, shape, or form. We don't see eye to eye on everything, never will, don't expect to. But we do see you obviously from hearing us talk, we see the same path. And sometimes she lights up something that I'm like, man, I never would have thought of that, and vice versa. And sometimes I want to try something one way and she goes, I think it would work better this way. Perfect.
Yeah.
We do a lot of that in the middle school where we've adapted things from other schools and other programs, and her influence on that changed from when Tom was there before and from when Beth was there before. So everything has evolves with the people that are there, but you have to let it evolve. You can't be stuck. You got to keep evolving.
I think a lot of it too is just consistency. Like we consistently a lot of times take on the same jobs, and so it builds a level of trust. It builds a level of our expectation for each other, and I think that's where a lot of team partnerships fall down, is that you were doing this for 2 weeks and then you stopped, that you never said why. And then there's animosity that builds about why you're not doing it anymore, and why some people feel like certain things are their jobs and other things are somebody else's job. You just have to check all of that. There are, well, like it's a simple example of, I take attendance at the high school every morning. I just started doing that. It's not a thing that I had to, but I know Tom starts class every day. He's the first one on the podium every day. So like you have to sit down and think to yourself, what's the logical thing that I could do in the mornings that's useful? And when there's 130 kids checking into one classroom, that's a big thing that can come off somebody's plate when they're not having to worry about it.
Sure.
And I think just that, like, we know, like, when there's a middle school program to be made, I'm going to make it. Like, when there's a high school program to be made, he's going to make it. When there's just decisions, that bus request that goes in, I'll do it for this school and you do it for that school. It's just a very clear definition of duties. And if I don't know what one of us is doing, or if something needs to be done or something, you have to ask. And I think that is a huge thing in partnerships everywhere, is just let go of whatever hang up you have about it and ask a question. Did you do that? You're not pointing any fingers, you're not doing anything. You just have to, like, communicate. And I don't know why adults sometimes struggle with that so much, but you just have to say, I need you to do this. And it's not a power thing. I'm not saying it because I think that's your job and you need to do it and that's at your level. You just got to get it done. The work's got to get done. And at the end of the day, all of it gets done because that's what the kids need for the program to function. And this,
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, no, in the grand scheme of things, is like everything has to function for the betterment of the program. It's not about how Tom and I look at the end of the day. It's that you're going to be able to tell real quick whether our 130 kids are organized with two people who get along. They're not. Like,
Tessa, you just said something though that's so important, that when it comes to this communication piece and this cooperation piece, that the one takeaway I would tell anybody is just to communicate. I was talking with my right-hand person here that helps me. We have a leadership team, but then there's me and this other person that kind of lead the leadership team, set the direction of the company. And we were talking about something, and I had said something that in a less transparent environment could have maybe been thought like, did I mean something more than what I'm saying? And I told her, I was like, by the way, I don't like mean anything else by that. I'm just saying that. She's like, trust me, I know you well enough that you'd be much more direct if there was a problem. And I hope she meant that positively. Maybe I should double check, but I do try to be direct, and I don't want to be rude or insensitive or anything, but I want to be clear. And if I'm upset about something, I will come up and pull an employee aside or in my office and say, hey, I got to tell you, I'm upset about something and I want to talk about it. I don't make it personal, but I try to be very clear. And I think sometimes we don't do that. And then because we are not communicating our concerns or displeasure, we then we get a little passive aggressive, and then we start reading into other people's behaviors and lack of communication. And we may read things into it that are not there. And so I think if we can just be bold enough to just communicate clearly and respectfully with one another, that would solve the vast majority of the issues that I see on teams.
I don't want it to sound like Tom and I have the perfect communication pattern all the time. That is not the case. there have been more than one day where I get home at the end of the day and I was like, I was really passive aggressive about that earlier. I'm really sorry.
She'll send me a text too, and I'm like, I wasn't offended at all.
Yeah.
Like you didn't get me at all. But
I think what it boils down to, and you're probably picking that up as we're sitting on this video together, is that Tom and I are friends. We are friends outside of our program. We talk about stuff other than band. And I think that is really important, is that we have to know each other, something about each other's lives outside of what we're doing 10 to 12 hours a day during the work week. And so it's important for him to know that, yeah, I can take this if you want to go home and be with your son or put Tommy to bed. And he knows, oh, my mom's birthday is this weekend and you're trying to get out of here on a Friday afternoon. You need to know those things about the people that you're working with when you're spending this much time with them. And I think that is a piece that like a lot of directors, they skip over because it's, oh, my work is at work and my home is at home. And yeah, that's true. But if you want your work to be at work and your home to be at home, then your people at work need to know what's important to you. And all that boils down to is we're friends. We talk about stuff that's not banned all the time.
yeah.
And so I think that's a really important piece too.
Yeah, I think that's what we're saying. It's not that we go hang out every weekend or we spend a whole lot of time at each other's houses. It wouldn't be that at all. But we don't start our day always talking about band. It's you need to hear this crazy thing that happened to me this weekend, or I'll send her a text on the weekend that's not about band. It's just like about, oh, did you see this crazy thing? Or oh, I'm out with my family at Christmas lights. Because at least then she has an appreciation for what my weekend was. Maybe when I come in and something wasn't done, and she was like, well, I know where he was all weekend. And I think that helps. It doesn't solve all those issues. It doesn't mean you don't have those animosities sometimes, but it definitely gives you that perspective. I think you're right, of that I know generally what her weekend's going to be about, and I know where mine is, and I know we communicate a couple weeks out, hey, this is really important. Like and it's not that hard to accommodate those things. It's really not. And something going back just a little bit, we were talking about as far as communication too, you have to communicate how you're feeling. We came to a point this year, unfortunately, we both were put in situations where we ended up getting COVID exactly apart. So we had this thing where we both got COVID, thing vaccinated and everything didn't matter. We were just in an environment where we were surrounded by it. So unfortunately we went through that, but it left that there was 2 full weeks where I taught I was the person, and there was 2 full weeks where she was the person. Cause
Those 2 weeks back to back. I'm just
4 weeks at the very, and unfortunately 2 weeks into school. But something I learned in that process was like, man, I really missed standing in front of the 7th grade band as much as I used to. I used to do that every day. Like I used to, when I was in Ellsbury, that's all I did. And yes, I had to give more of that responsibility to her, but we had a conversation that I really thought she would be not okay with, which was, I want to stand in front of the middle school band more. I think I have more to teach there than I do right now. And I don't want to step on your toes because I want to keep the program separate, but can I do more? Absolutely. Would you be willing to pick up some of this stuff that you weren't doing before, just so that that I can get a little bit more time in front? And I think you have to have that respect. Like, I think she at this point trusts my vision and direction on what things are going. She came into the program, and it's not that she has to kowtow to everything I feel or think, but there's a level of trust here where she knows that if I'm going to stand in front of the 7th grade band, I've got something probably to teach him, and vice versa. And that has to be a conversation. And as I said, it's one of those that it was really hard for me to approach with her, but it wasn't a problem for me to sit down and talk to her about it. And had I just kept that in the back of my mind and not just sat down and gone, I need to do this. Now, that doesn't mean that it happens every week, but she does now at the beginning of the week go, what days do you want to be in front of the 7th grade this week? And I go, well, we're in the middle of a Disney trip, so I really got to do this and this. So probably not. Or she knows if I don't show up that day that I had too much work to do at the high school. Like you have to have a give and take there. And I think that's
great, you guys. This has just been really a remarkable conversation, and I'm glad that we could share some of the basics of communication, how you two work together, but really loved what we got into of talking about chop shops and growing the color guard program. And I think that's going to be something that's just going to resonate and hit with a lot of people. And it's so funny that I intentionally try to sometimes steer things away from marching band, because I think so many times marching band, it has an inordinate amount of focus in our program, but so many things do come back to it. And it is the program. It's generally our largest program. It's the program that has the most student involvement. It's the program that is most involved with the community usually. So it's inevitable that it does come down to that. But yeah, this was really fantastic. I thoroughly enjoyed it.